Hi, in this one, we'll be actually getting our hands dirty with the if, elif, else, construct, or conditional statements in Python, and we'll be teaching our program to take decisions and give us outputs based on those decisions. So, this is going to be pretty simple. What we're going to be doing is, I hope you've already fired up your PyCharm. Once you have, just go up onto File, create a new project. Let's call it, first let's just go ahead and select the storage location, put a forward slash as always, and let's call this project um, greatest number. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to solve a very simple and small problem with this project, which is we're going to be asking the user to enter three numbers. We're going to store those numbers in three variables, and then what we're going to be doing is we are going to be asking our program to decide which is the largest of the three numbers. So let's just get ahead and do this. Now, the first step is to ask the user for input. In this case, we want to ask for three numbers. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create three variables. Let me take easy variable names, which would be number 1 equals number 2 equals something, and number 3 equals something. Now, what is this something? We just want to take like an integer or maybe even a float, right? So let's take floats from users this time. To do that, what we're going to be doing is we'll use a float typecast, and inside the float typecast, we'll be using the input function. And yeah, in the input function, let's just write something like kindly enter the first number and a colon just for representation. Then again, float input, and here we'll have kindly enter the second number, and finally float input, kindly enter the third number. Alright, so a very quick trivia question for you guys on the basis of what we have learned. Why are we using this float typecast with the input statement right here? Put your answers down below in the comments. If you're not able to figure it out, well, I'll be saying that at the end of this lesson. So I'll be answering that at the end of this lesson, so don't worry about it, but try to pause the video and answer that question in the comments down below. Now, we've got our first three numbers. We're taking input from the user in the float data type and storing it inside the variable number 1. Now, the next thing that we want to do is we want to write our conditional statements to help our program decide which is the largest of these three numbers, right? So the first thing that we compare is, let's say, number 1 and number 2, right? So if number 1 is greater than number 2, yeah, that's the first condition. But we could actually pair this up with another condition to see if number 1 is the greatest. So I'm just going to put this in parentheses, or just put brackets around it, curved brackets around it, and use the AND operator. So if number 1 is greater than number 2 and number 1 is greater than number 3, so I'm going to put that as a separate condition right here, and that makes up one whole condition. Then we simply print out the greatest number is, and then plus str of number 1. Yeah, why are we using plus str of number 1 this typecast? Because we know that our number 1 is a float, and you cannot concatenate a string with a float or an int. So you need to convert or typecast the float to a string variable, and then you can concatenate that value to the string right here, which says the greatest number is, right? Then what we'll do is we'll write our next statement, which is elif. All right, so elif, what do we want to check here? So elif, we want to check if 2 is the greatest number. So elif number 2 is greater than number 3, and number 2 is greater than number 1. Yeah, I just wrote that the other way around, which is all right. And what happens here? So first off, just taking a quick break, one step back, which needs to point out that, well, this colon, you cannot miss this colon after your conditions, right? So after your if or your elif or your else conditions, you cannot miss this colon right here. So in this case, what we're doing is we're writing our elif statement, which basically checks if number 2 is greater than number 3 and number 2 is greater than number 1. So in this case, we simply print, I'm just going to copy this whole thing, the greatest number is, and paste it right here. And instead of number 1, we want number 2, right? That's pretty simple. So we've done these two conditions, right, in which we get to know if number 1 is the greatest number or number 2 is the greatest number. Let's write the next one, which is elif number 3 is greater than number 1 and number 3 is greater than number 2, and then we put a colon here as always, and then we print out, well, I've already copied it, so I'm just going to paste that. The greatest number is number 3, and then the last condition. So think about this, right? If number 1 is not the greatest, which is if this condition is false and this condition is false, this whole condition is false, right? So we go to the elif. If this condition is false and this condition is false, then this whole condition is again false. So we go to the next elif. If this condition is false and this condition is false, then again this whole condition is false. This means that if number 1 is not greater than number 2 and number 3, number 2 is not greater than number 1 and number 3, and number 3 is not greater than number 1 and number 2, that means that number 1, number 2, and number 3 are equal. So we'll just write else print all the numbers are equal, right? So when we print that, the user knows that, all right, I've entered all equal numbers, and your program is able to properly make a decision on that and actually give an output. So let's just test it out and then also explore what are these spaces for? Why are we adding these spaces? Why does PyCharm automatically add these spaces? Why don't we write a print statement right here? So this is something that we're going to be checking out in just a bit. So let me run that. This says kindly enter the first number. So let me write 10, 20, and 30, and it should say the greatest number is 30.0. Why does it give the 0.0 while I gave it an integer? Because, well, we're typecasting it into a float. So a float always has a decimal, and that's why your 30 becomes 30.0, your 20 becomes 20.0, and the 10 becomes 10.0. So yeah, let's test it out with some different inputs. So I could write 10, 10, and 10, and it says all the numbers are equal, and maybe 10, 10, 20, and it says the greatest number is 20. So we've got a pretty successful program, but one question remains unanswered, which is, what are these spaces, right? Why am I leaving these spaces, and what do they really signify? So each of these spaces that you see, these are actually 4 spaces. So if I make you count them, that's 1, 2, 3, and 4 spaces everywhere here. These spaces, this set of 4 spaces, is called an indent, or it's just called indentation, where you're indenting that line. What this does is every line that is indented right here under this if at this level. So if I have another print here and another print and another print, right? What does this tell Python? It tells Python that all lines that have one indent or one indentation right here, yeah, they belong to this if statement. And similarly for everyone else. So if I just copy this and I paste it right here and right here and right here, what it basically means is that all of these lines belong to this if statement. So if these conditions are true, then all of these lines will be executed. If these conditions are true, then all of these lines will be executed. If these conditions are true, then all of these will be executed. And similarly for the else, if none of the conditions are true, then the else block will be executed, which executes all of these 4 lines, or well, unlimited lines is what you could have in these. But it needs to be at the same level of indentation. Now let's say I just put another indentation. So I use the tab key on my keyboard to get this indentation, or I could simply use the space key 4 times, which is 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? So when I get this indentation, what happens here is, first off, we see these red squiggly lines because number one, this is the wrong syntax, because this doesn't make any sense to Python. Why does this indentation, why does the second indentation exist? You already need just one indentation to tell Python that this line belongs to this elif statement. So why would this indent actually exist, right? Now, in Python, it's really a game of indentations. Let's say I wanted to add another if statement inside the first if statement, or inside this elif, or inside this elif, or inside this else. What I would do is, at the same indentation level as the prints, I write if, and then some kind of condition. Let's say 10 is greater than 20. I'd put a colon, and then inside this, I'd print something, right? So now you can see I've got an if statement, the condition. If this condition is true, this gets printed. Then my program comes here, it checks for this condition. If this condition is true, then it prints this print statement. So now this indentation block, it really makes sure that this print statement right here on line 8 belongs to this if statement and not this if statement. Yeah, so that is how we play with indentations in Python. Now let's say inside this inside this if statement, you needed another if statement. So you could just write if, then your condition. Again, I'll just write 10 is equal to 20 for example's sake, and then I could have a print block. So now what happens is that this if statement has this print statement, and this if statement has this print statement. So what I would suggest is you write this program by yourself once to practice, and as a challenge, write a program that takes these three inputs from a user and then gives you a result of the smallest number that was entered. That's going to be pretty simple. I'm just going to give you some time. You could actually just pause the video right now before I give out the solution for that question, and yeah, try it out by yourself. Try your newly acquired if-else skills out, and well, let's see if you're able to do it. If not, here's the solution. So we already have our numbers set here. The next thing that we want to do is we want to change our conditions. In this case, what we are planning to do is we are planning to write a program which helps us find out the smallest number that was entered. So in this case, we want to check first if number 1 is smaller than number 2 and number 1 is smaller than number 3. So we use the less than sign here and the less than sign here. And we do the same for number 2 and for number 3. So that gets done. That gets done just like that. And well, instead of greatest, we just write smallest. I'm just going to copy, paste, paste. And the equal condition just stays the same. So we don't really need to worry about that. And now when I click on run, it asks me to enter numbers. Let me write 100, 101, and 99.99. Yeah, so in this case, we know that 99.99 is the smallest number, and when we press enter, it says the smallest number is 99.99. So guys, I hope you understood the if-else concept, the concept of indentations in this. You will get used to indentations very, very soon, because in the next one, we're going to be building a very simple calculator using if-else, where you will get acquainted a lot more with these indentations and the if-elif-else blocks. So don't worry about it. As of now, you could actually give yourself questions, create small pseudo programs that help you understand the concept of if-else. Otherwise, you have all of this in your course resources, and I will involve some practice questions in the assignment section for this course. So don't worry about that. Just make sure you're completing all the practice questions on your PyCharm and learn if-else, because this is super important. It's a very, very fundamental topic that you will be using, and it really will be beneficial for you throughout your programming journey. Anyways, until then, just have fun, and I'll see you in the next one.